Welcome back to the Purrfect Takes. This is Stephen Patton, your host, joined by my co-host and dear friend Jacob Acquire. And it didn't snow this past weekend, but it felt like it did when Chalen Coker went absolutely nuclear. I'm sure Coke dealers all in Charlotte had a massive weekend, and rightfully so. The guy went off for 9 receptions, over 130 yards, had a score, put us in a position to win the game, but unfortunately, Jiro Evero and the defense couldn't hold as the Rams pulled off a playoff classic 34-31. I couldn't be more proud than this Panthers team and in a very long time. And that's hard to say because you don't want to say you're proud of a loss, but when you have that kind of fight and resiliency, when you see the crowd that showed up and how we were just raucous and rocking and rolling, and it just that kind of feeling has not been in this city for 10 years. So I I know it was unfortunate that we didn't advance, but Jacob, I'm proud of how this 2025 season ended for us.
I'm glad that somebody was happy. You mentioned a certain profession of people being happy after Jalen Coker's performance. It sucks to lose, right? It sucks to lose the final game of the season. But you're right. This is a team that I think the season win total was around 6.5, maybe 5.5. We obviously surpassed that. We win the division for the first time in 10 years. And even though it was a playoff loss, every time a big play happened, you could hear that crowd. You could hear it from across the North Carolina and South Carolina. It was that loud. A packed house for the stadium. They showed out. We proved that yes, you should host a home playoff game if you win the division. Doesn't matter if you're 17-0 or 8-9, or I don't know what the mathematical lowest thing could be, like 4-13, I guess. Doesn't matter what it is. I think you could get there if there's a bunch of losses and you win your division games. But we proved that we belong, I think. We were still the team that scored the second most points the entire weekend. Obviously, the Rams scored the most because they won. But I think the Panthers, offense and defense, proved we belong. Bryce Young proved that he's an actual franchise QB. I think he showed out this game. And then Jalen Coker, I think, was the guy who proved the most, right? Proved that he should be a starter moving forward. And Dave Canales has said as much, but you mentioned it, 9 receptions, 134 yards, just an excellent throw and catch touchdown to put the Panthers ahead late in the fourth quarter. We didn't pull out the win, but I think Coker had a phenomenal game. So while I'm incredibly disappointed that we lost, because you want to keep winning, you got to be proud. The crowd, the team, everything we've accomplished. The trajectory seems like it's actually going up, like with proof of concept that it's going up for the first time in what, 8, 9 seasons, something like that. So you can't be too disappointed with how the game went.
And referring to 8 or 9 years ago, the quarterback during that time was Cam Newton, and I think seeing him out on the field, seeing him beat the drum, there were videos of people that were like further away from the stadium, and when he entered the field, you could just hear it going bonkers. And it's just the love that the city of Charlotte has for Cam Newton, the fact that he could be there in that special moment, the fact that we had Greg Olson in the booth calling the game, one of the best broadcasters, TV color analysts out there is amazing. And so I just seeing all of that and witnessing, like you said, the second highest scoring performance of the entire weekend. And this was how the playoffs got kicked off here in Charlotte. And we didn't disappoint. And like you said, building towards something that's tangible. You're playing in a division that's very winnable. This could be a situation where we're 11, maybe even a 12-win team next year, and you win the division and you win a playoff game or two. And that's the kind of building block and step you want to take towards something like that. The other thing I would probably point out on defense, I know we allowed 34 points, but the fact of the matter is you go down 17-7, you get stuck in this like 4th and 3 situation as Euro Evero calls this cool like cover 2 design, and we're able to get them off the field, keep them from converting, and then Bryce Young right before half drives down and scores a touchdown on a scramble, making it a 17-14 game. Like that would If I had the pinpoint one play that really changed the dynamic, it was that stop. Because had they kicked a field goal, they would have gone up 20-7. And I don't know if we would have necessarily gone down and scored a touchdown, but at that point, you're putting yourself in a position where you're multiple scores ahead and kind of almost putting out of reach. The fact that that didn't happen, you're able to drive down, score a touchdown is huge. Like that is the kind of playmaking you want to see from your quarterback. And I think it's a big reason why the team picked up his fifth year option today. I don't know if he's going to be the only one in the quarterback room. We've seen him miss a couple games. I would like to see this team bring in competition, or at least a viable backup, that if he goes down for any number of games, that we aren't going to skip a beat if we have Andy Dalton step in, because that's what we saw this past year in the Buffalo Bills game. And that sometimes impacts your ability to win a division or playoff seeding and stuff like that. And so we'll have a number of conversations today about like what else this team needs to do. But that, I thought, was one of the pivotal moments in the game.
You mentioned Cam Newton being in the city, in the stadium for this game. Looked like he was on the field for that particular touchdown you're talking about. Bryce Young scrambling, hits a dead leg and goes, it was like 18 or 19 yards for a rushing score right before the half. He had a passing touchdown as well to Jalen Coker. Two playoff touchdowns, pretty solid pedestrian numbers for your first game ever, right? Caleb Williams had two as well. I think Drake May had one among the younger QBs there. Justin Herbert, many regard him as a top five quarterback, also has two playoff touchdowns throughout his career through three games. For some perspective,
Jawan
Jawan
Jennings
Jennings,
has
yeah, the 49ers wide receiver, has two passing touchdowns as well. So when you put Bryce Young in the same era as some of those players, I think it looks a little bit better. But I think overall, I was impressed with how we played. But yeah, we need competition at every level. I think certainly with QB, if not for Bryce Young, then for Andy Dalton. Dalton was unplayable in that Buffalo Bills game, but the fact of the matter was we didn't have anybody else, right? I think Mike White had just been signed to the practice squad, and I don't think he was game ready. So I certainly wouldn't mind seeing or even drafting a young QB like late in the upcoming draft to learn behind Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, or even they're not going to be able to afford Malik Willis because he's going to get like significant money from like the Cardinals or something, or the Jets as a bridge guy. But bringing in like a real backup that has played significant backups, snaps, games, whatever you want to call it, and has performed adequately, as opposed to Dalton, who, outside of that Raiders game 2 years ago now, really hasn't been good when he's had to step in. But that's a key spot for sure. I think as we kind of transition away from the playoff game, going forward, obviously we're not playing next week, right? So we don't have any games to preview, unfortunately, but there are a lot of areas that need to be addressed. You mentioned that we learned Ejiro Evero was extended, I think, prior to this season. So at least for the time being, it seems his defensive scheme is what we're going to see at least the next year, the next couple of years. And so if that's the case, we need some people in the front seven still, I think. Uh, Despite how good the corners were, how good the safeties were at times, I think the linebacking group, and it had its fair share of injuries, but the linebackers and the edge rushers kind of let the rest of the defense down. We need to get an edge rusher, like a true number one pass rusher. I don't know if the team's going to be in the market for a Max Crosby or to dish out however much Trey Hendrickson's going to make, but I think that's the first step to completing this roster and making it a viable, deep playoff roster as opposed to just winning the division.
And I agree with you, because if you're going to keep Ejiro Evero in the building, he's not drawing up these simulated pressures that get guys in favorable matchups. So you're just going to have to get a dude that dominates on the defensive line. And obviously, this past offseason, the goal was to get these run stuffers and be able to stop the run. And that was something that we saw a massive improvement in. You saw the extension on Mike Jackson pay off, probably the most valuable signing this team saw. He was playing lights out against the Rams, shutting down Puka Nacua. Devontae Adams had an interception this game. Just an absolute stud. And so you see the secondary come together. You see pieces on the defensive line, but like you said, we need help at the linebacker position. Roseboom has been probably the only bright spot. I know we dished out a third round pick for Trevin Wallace. He looked good when he was healthy this past year, and hopefully he continues to take a step. But it's just seeing again the doubling down of making this team better on that side of the ball, because at this point, the offensive side, as long as everybody stays healthy, this looks like a good group. Obviously, Ike Ekwonu has a patellar tendon injury, and he'll be out probably till, I want to say, probably November, December of this coming year, maybe even a little bit later. It's harder coming back from some of those lower leg injuries, lower body injuries as a 300-pound person. But I think that's where the Panthers will address either re-signing Josh Nyman or Brady Christensen. And at that point, I think that's good enough stopgap while we wait for Ike Ekwonu to get back. Are there any other concerns that you have across this roster as we're going into the offseason? Because why we've been able to play with the best of the best this year, this is a team that went into the playoffs with a negative 69-point differential. And that's not nice. If it was a positive number, that's cool and all. But sneaking into the playoffs with that, that's something I want to see improved, is that you aren't getting blown out and you're not just winning close games. You're starting to beat up on the bad teams, and then you're playing those good teams as well. And that's I think that the turn we want to see from this group. And whether or not we will remains to be seen. But I think how we were putting games together at the end of the year definitely shows that that is the trajectory for this team.
Yeah, that's the next step, right? You win close, even the games that you should be winning. I feel like we won close just because I think it was what Dave Canales wanted. He wanted to end the game with the ball, right? Like kick game-winning field goals and stuff like that, instead of blowing teams out, like probably like we should have. You got to play better throughout the entire game and every game, and that starts with the trenches, right? Obviously, left tackle is going to be a priority, as you mentioned. Ike Ekwonu, I think it was a clean tear of his patellar tendon, which 6 to 12 months, you don't know if he'll be back. Uh, Before training camp or when training camp ends, you don't know if he'll be back at all next season, right? Because you got to remember he got injured in January of this year, so that could be a long road to recovery. I think just some general O line depth is good as well, like re-signing some of the guys like Cade Mays, Brady Christensen, who also had a season-ending injury. But then on the defensive side as well, I think this is where you have to improve, right? The offense you mentioned, when you're healthy, especially seeing how good Coker can be against a pretty good playoff defense, I think you feel good about your receiving options. But on defense, uh, every level needs to be addressed. I haven't been impressed with Trevin Wallace when he was on the field this season. It's like he has a lot of traits, but it hasn't come together as much. I thought Christian Rosemoon performed admirably as the green dot guy. But yeah, getting a starting linebacker in free agency and in the draft, I think, is paramount. Edge rusher, like we mentioned, a deep, like a coverage safety on the back end as well. I'm not as big of a Nick Scott detractor or complainer as a lot of people in the fan base are. I thought he's actually played well, like the last month and a half up until this game. He obviously, you can say he dropped the potential game sealing
That's a
interception.
forced
Puka
incompletion. I
Nakua,
won't say
yeah,
that's a drop.
Puka Nakua became Darrell Revis on that play and punched it out right at the end because Stafford threw up a Cajun filet biscuit there for Nick Scott. It was just unfortunate uh, ball control, I guess. It was a forced incompletion. But I thought he played well, but he is also a free agent this upcoming season. So safety, like you said, linebacker, and then I would throw tight end in there as well. We need a real tight end that can do stuff over the middle of the field or at least be a safety valve. I don't know if they want to spend big on like Kyle Pitts or Isaiah Likely or any of the free agents, but I think you need a number one tight end receiving option. We haven't really had that since JT Sanders injured his neck against the Chiefs last season. Right, I guess it would be 2 seasons ago now. So there are a lot of areas that this team could attack in both free agency, which is March 9th this year, I think, is when the tampering period starts. So earlier than last season. And then the draft is on April 23rd. So a little bit earlier as well. I'm not, you and I were talking before the recording session here. I'm not a huge fan preliminarily of this draft. I think the talent level isn't necessarily there like it was last year or that it will be next year. So if you want to get a little crazy and trade your picks this year, I think this is the year to do it, to get a guy like Crosby if he's available or a premium position good player. But there are, like we're talking about, there are a ton of areas that need to be addressed going forward for this team.
To the point about safety, you have Nick Scott, you have Lathan Ransom. Hopefully, Lathan Ransom develops. Maybe grabbing
Hmm.
another safety at the like day two, day three of the draft. Dressing a linebacker in a deep linebacker class, I think is something that we can do this year. But yeah, like you're saying, maybe it's moving a first round pick for a guy like Max Crosby, and that might be a little rich. And obviously, this is a franchise that jettisoned Brian Burns out of here and didn't want to pay him. So it's definitely difficult to see if this front office, if this team even values that position as much as we're talking about, even though that is an area of need. And so going off of that, I want to kind of touch on that point about Isaiah Likely. It's like, okay, maybe the goal is to address like some of these like more tertiary positions or not these glaring needs, but definitely a concern and something you can improve in. And I think if you're able to bring in a guy like Isaiah Likely, and this is something we've talked about over the course of the season, but Dave Canales may be taking a step back from play calling and bringing an offensive coordinator. A guy that's called plays for Isaiah Likely the past couple of years is Todd Monken. And with John Harbaugh now out of Baltimore, maybe he brings Todd Monken where he goes, and that could be New York. But that's a guy that's a free agent. I think having a guy that clearly has great offensive ideas and learning how to blend that with maybe a Dave Canales, you might have a better product on the field and be able to be better at problem solving when you come in the different scenarios. And so I don't know if Todd Monken's necessarily the guy, but having maybe an influx of ideas on that side of the ball could help what you already have in place. Because we saw, for instance, like the run game, obviously you have backup offensive linemen in, but over the back half of the season, this was not a good running team. And so getting back to being able to pound the rock, having Jalen Coker and T Mac healthy to start next year, I think all of that could be a great nucleus to get this to an above average offense. I'd love to see us pushing like top 12 metrics sometime next year. And I think that's definitely doable when you look at all the pieces. They just have to come together. And unfortunately, with any NFL season, you're going to have ups and downs. So there's no guarantee there. But again, looking at yourself in the mirror, doing self evaluation, and going from there is a great point. I think the only negative I have going into this, and I think a lot of people were talking about this at the end of the game, is Giro Evero decided to play prevent defense, and it's just you went away from what was working all game. You were able to kind of disrupt Matthew Stafford when you were able to generate pressure. And I think if you're able to lean more into that, that's great. But I don't know if Giro Evero is that guy. And if we keep seeing these putrid defensive performances where you have these quarterbacks that are able to just slice and dice their way through this defense, at some point something's got to give and change. And so hopefully maybe it's just the front office is able to give Ejiro Evero all the pieces he needs to deploy his defense correctly. Or again, we're going to be having this conversation next year when this could have been fixed this offseason.
Yeah, it feel like excuse me, it feels like we had that conversation this time last year, right? When we were quite literally the worst defense of all time in terms of points allowed. We've obviously stepped it up in that regard, but still, I believe 31st in third down conversion rate. So second worst defense there. Not great in the red zone. Not great in points overall, but just not 32nd. And I think yards were around the middle of the league as well. There will always be areas to improve. Hopefully, we can get the pieces there. But yeah, that the we can call it prevent defense. That style of play, to me, I'll never kind of gel with that idea. Like I would always try to disrupt rather than prevent because we were talking about this as well. You could have Luke Kuechly, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Darrell Rivas, whoever you want on the back end, and somebody like Stafford is going to find the open spots with Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams. So I would always lean toward getting disruptors up front, and hopefully that's what the front office does this season. I will say the past 2 years, right, getting the two guards in there has really helped. Getting fortifying the run defense along the defensive line, I think helped this year. We weren't nearly as bad as we were last year when we allowed, I think it was the second most rushing yards of all time. So I think Dan Morgan, he's hit where he's hit, and now I think he really needs to hone in on players that can affect the quarterback from a pass rush perspective and from a linebacker perspective because we've still been really bad at covering running backs and tight ends. I think that's kind of my, or at least our synopsis on what the Panthers need to do moving forward. Do we want to talk about any of the games that we watched this week or any of the upcoming games as well? I know the first, we'll call it 4 games, I thought
Yeah.
were absolute bangers. The Patriots and Chargers game, defensive slugfest. If that's your thing, it was a good game. The game last night, Monday night, absolutely terrible. The Texans defense just dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers. But other than our game, what was your favorite game or favorite moment from a game in the first, or I guess the latter 5 games of Wild Card Weekend?
Man, I can easily tell you what was not my favorite, but leaning into more favorites, I think, and it obviously he came back and he had 2 interceptions, but I was very much in accord with Richard Sherman when he came out and he spoke about the All Pro votes. The fact that J.C. Horn and Derek Brown, a take I had earlier in the year that I thought they would make at least a All Pro team. Like I thought these guys had played at a high enough level that they deserved those kind of honors and recognition. Neither of them get that. And then you see Quinyon Mitchell opening drive against the 49ers get absolutely torched. And it's just, it's puzzling to me, like Richard Sherman said. It's like you have like the accolades. And it's so funny. Like everybody wants to talk about like Matthew Stafford having the MVP over Drake May and using like touchdowns and the touchdown to interception ratio argument and all these archaic metrics to justify your reason for a vote. And it's like JC Horn like was one of the highest leaders in interceptions all year. Like give the man his flowers kind of situation. Obviously, he gets torched by Puka, who drops a pass in the end of the first half this past game. But that was a moment that I thought was very fitting, like ball don't lie. I'm trying to think like what was my favorite moment of this weekend because had I made picks, a lot of the teams I was leaning towards, I think I went like 2 of 4. I think I would have leaned the Patriots and the Texans in those games. I think everybody else I got wrong. I think I was leaning more the Jaguars because they were hot against Buffalo and Josh Allen, he was getting banged up in the first half and then pulled it together. I mean, that throw to Brandon Cooks in the second half really iced that game. And I'm excited to see what happens in Denver because the last time the Broncos and Bills faced off in the playoffs last year, it wasn't a competitive game. So I'm very curious to see what happens if Bo Nix is able to rise above and be better than he was last year in that matchup and a rematch. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this if you go a different direction as favorite moment of the weekend.
So for me, going back to that Eagles Niners game, that was I was in the same boat as you in terms of picks, except for that one. I picked the Niners, and seeing McCaffrey get 2 touchdowns was really cool. The first one being the Juwan Jennings play. I thought that was cool. They've run that one before, and Jennings. I don't know if you knew this, but when he was recruited to Tennessee, he was a quarterback recruit initially. He transitioned to wide receiver, but he can sling it, and he obviously threw a good one. Then on McCaffrey's second touchdown, this was it's not a unique brand new idea, but the play that he ran, he starts on the right side of Brock Purdy, then runs through the C gap, like runs all the way across the line like he's going to be a blocker, runs out and then hits a Texas route or a choice route back inside toward the middle of the field. So it took him a while, but he ran a similar wheel route, text route, whatever you want to call it. But he went across the line to do it and then ran it backwards for an open touchdown. Thought that was a unique wrinkle there. And then just talking about the job Kyle Shanahan's doing, right? All the injuries they have, and they're still able to go into Philly and pull that one off. And then on the flip side, Philadelphia not being able to do it, firing their offensive coordinator a few minutes before we started recording here. I wonder what's going to happen there, right? I feel like something has to give between AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and Nick Sirianni. It seems like there's always conflict there, right? I don't remember who was calling. I think it was Tom Brady calling the game, right? Or it might have been somebody else. And they're
I think
like,
you're right on Tom Brady.
he was like, "Oh, AJ Brown and Nick Sirianni, they love each other." And then you see on the sideline AJ Brown just screaming at the coach, and they have their mascot, Big Dom, who's like the enforcer, just this very big bodyguard, I guess, that Sirianni has break up the little skirmish there. But I'm interested to see where that goes. As far as the upcoming games, the Bills Broncos one's probably the most interesting to me as well, right? Obviously, the last time these two teams met, the Broncos scored first, I believe. They had to
Mm-hmm.
score first, and it was like a
Bo Nix threw a
very
bomb. It was
clean
like a
opening
40-yard
drive.
pass.
I think it was Troy Franklin that caught it. I don't. It might have been Marvin Mims, and then the Bills scored like 48 straight or something like that. I think it's going to be a little different this time. It's in Denver. Denver was the 1 seed. They're going to have the advantage because the Bills will be on a shorter week, right? Mile high in the winter. We'll see what happens there. I think that'll be interesting. And then the NFC side, it's kind of like the anti Steve Bowl, so to speak. We have a friend who's a Rams fan, and we were kind of getting into it during the game. But the LA Rams and the Bears, I don't have a good beat on that one. I would imagine, or I would lean toward the Rams just because I think Stafford's playing better than Caleb Williams recently. But I think the Bears team as a whole probably has some key advantage. Like their DBs just pluck things out of the air, right? And the Rams defensive backs don't necessarily do that. So I think that's going to be an interesting game as well. I think the Texans and Patriots
It's
game too, but the one, yeah, go ahead, the Rams and Bears. I think that's the one you're going to be most focused on.
yeah, I have a lot at stake, at least from for my Twitter namesake. And I think what's interesting is that Sean McVay is 0-2 in Chicago. The most recent loss, I think, actually coming in 2024 in Caleb Williams' rookie year. And to your point about Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore advances. So former Panthers players are still in the playoff hunt, still in the mix. Unfortunately, as we sit back, but looking at the Bears, they're playing in Chicago. I think they've lost 8 straight Sunday night football games. They are going to be hosting the Rams on Sunday night football. It's one of those things like what gives? Does McVay get his first win? Do the Bears end their 8-game losing streak on Sunday night football? A lot of topsy turvy there, and then we get the rematch that we had in the final week of the regular season, Seahawks 49ers. I think at this point with the 49ers being banged up, I don't think it's going to go their way. So it's really one of the two teams are going to go to Seattle, and it'll be interesting. I really am intrigued to see because Matthew Stafford doesn't play well in the cold. Does he play better than he typically does in these weather conditions? Are they able to lean into their run game a little bit more? Do the Bears have an answer for what Sean McVay is going to draw up? And then similarly, the Rams defense, Ahkello Witherspoon going out is huge. As soon as he went out in the Panthers game, I knew it was just attack the perimeter, attack the perimeter. It was one of the things that I got perplexed by with the interception when he was trying to find Coker across the middle. It's like you have these one-on-one matchups on the outside with these smaller corners. Take advantage of that. And as the game wore on, we definitely did that more. And so just very curious to see how Ben Johnson attacks this Rams defense, and very curious to see is the Rams pass rush going to be impactful, or is the Bears top 5 offensive line group going to be able to give Caleb Williams the time to deliver plays down the stretch? Any other thoughts before we wrap up here? Will probably be kind of wrapped up for a few weeks here until, like you said, free agency kicks off March 9th. And then obviously we'll do our draft previews as we always do. But I mean, for the third season of Purrfect Takes, I think this is definitely starting to build towards something. And considering that we started this podcast right as we drafted Bryce Young, and watching his journey and his trajectory, it'll be very cool to see his growth going to year 4.
I didn't even think about the draft connection there. Man, we had yeah, right as we drafted Young, and then Mingo was in that draft, and everybody, DJ Johnson. I think Zavallo is the only other player who survived it, and I think he was on IR a lot this season. The only other note I would have is the Texans Patriots game. That one's like, obviously the Patriots are better than the Steelers, but Drake May didn't play particularly well against a much worse defense, I think, in the Chargers than the Texans group. So I don't really know how that one's going to go. I would lean the Patriots just because Drake May, Charlotte guy, possible MVP candidate, but that one has potential as well to be an interesting one. Like we saw last night, the Steelers had won like 30 consecutive Monday night games. They lose that one, so you never know what can happen in the playoffs. And then you mentioned McVay. This will be McVay's played in or coached 15 playoff games, and he
And
said
played,
15 unique opponents. Isn't that neat? Like that
I
I
think
don't
it
know
would
how that's
change
happened,
next
but
week because I think he's played the Seahawks and the 49ers. So
he
I think
has.
that will change if they advance.
Right, but that's such a weird and cool, unique factor there. I think we can get into our takes, and my take is along the lines of these games. I think we're going to have an all NFC West NFC championship game. And that's kind of a cop out because one of the halves is guaranteed to be NFC West between the 49ers and the Seahawks. But I do think the Rams will pull it off. I think they're going to have momentum building on this game. I don't necessarily think that they overlooked the Panthers this time, given how we had played them in our first meeting. But I think scraping by and escaping with a win kind of will have McVay and the whole group on edge. Like, oh, we need to take our game up a little bit. If the 8 and 9 Panthers did this to us, what can the 2 seed Bears do? Right. So I think they're going to be on their P's and Q's. Their I's and J's have been dotted. Their T's have been crossed, and I think they're going to be ready for this one. So I think it'll be Rams versus I'll just say the Seahawks now. I don't think the Niners could overcome the Eagles because there's a level of incompetence there. I think the Seahawks are such a like hardwired machine right now, and I don't think that they'll have the same opportunities that they did versus Philly. So I'll say Seahawks and Rams for probably the two best teams in the NFL. I would say that'll be the NFC Championship.
I like that. I think a lot of people were kind of aware that that could be the NFC Championship game. And I think the last time we saw an NFC West Championship game was 2013, right? When the Seahawks went and beat the
Niners and
Broncos. Yeah, those
yeah.
two.
Oh,
And so,
in
like,
the Super Bowl. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well, they advanced to the championship game, but like having an NFC championship game with two NFC West teams,
Yes,
like
yes,
it's
yes,
been a
yes.
minute, but that was a instant classic. I could see it also being another classic. You have Devonte Adams back. It could be a complete shootout. I will say, from the Rams standpoint, I could see them dominate for 3 quarters. It's just going to come down to that last quarter. And can you put the brakes on this offense when Caleb Williams seems to shake off the rust and do what he does? My take is going to be Panthers related. And as much as I want to see us go after, like you said, a Max Crosby, maybe a Trey Hendrickson, this team has limited resources with already spending a lot of money on the trenches. I don't think that they address the edge rusher position with a first round pick or like a big signing. And I think that's frustrating. I could see us like getting like a B or C list type guy, like a DJ Wanham that we've gotten, or some of these guys where it's like, given the right circumstance, they might hit 10 sacks, but I don't see us addressing that position because the front office has made it abundantly clear over the past couple of years that is not a position of immediate concern or need. So with that in mind, as frustrated as I am and as much improvement as we've seen from this team, I think we're still going to be disappointed with that position group come next fall.
Yeah, I could see that. It's clearly not the priority, right? And with Ekwanu potentially missing the whole season, that shifts the lenses of what the team needs even more, right? If you want to build off of Bryce Young's ascendancy in the playoffs and the offense and stuff, you need a good left tackle. So that could be where they go in round one of the draft. So certainly, excuse me, could see that. Hopefully, we do break the mold there and go after a difference maker, or at least multiple like Jalen Phillips level guys, like just to inject the room with some talent. But I think that's going to do it. I'm not sure what our schedule will look like. We might do like a season review in the coming weeks, but then, like you said, free agency and a couple draft episodes before the actual draft week, I think is something that we'll probably look at. So a handful of
March
episodes
9th
before
is
the draft.
Monday, so I could definitely see us doing a podcast on the 10th of March, which puts us like
Yeah,
almost like 2 months out. But yeah, like maybe shoot for the Tuesday after the Super Bowl, just as the NFL
yeah,
season
as
is
a season
completely wrapped up.
review.
And like
And
you said, yeah,
oh, and we need to go over the teams we drafted as well.
there we go. I think that would
Yeah,
be and the honors comes out right before the Super Bowl. So I think the
yeah.
next time you'll hear from us will be right after the Super Bowl. We'll do kind of the end of season review. Jacob, first time out of 3 years. I was starting to build a lead, but you've cut into it. He has the season. We pick games. We don't talk about it. We gotta do better about posting it. But Jacob took the lead. What was your final record on the season? Do you have that?
I don't have the
Oh,
record, but I know
yeah.
I
Yeah, you were up
1
like
game
2
no, excuse
games,
me,
like
2
2.
games ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the predictions, we pick all the games each week. I think both of us are at over 600 every single time. It's not hard to go
Mhm.
over 600 as like a picks person, but Jacob took the lead on that. And then, yes, doing some of the honors once we see, because we have all the all pros, but it's waiting for the MVPs and stuff like that to come in to go down our teams and see who picked the best roster. So you'll hear from us after the Super Bowl and then free agency, and then the draft will be here before you know it.
Absolutely. Your Bijan Robinson pick is looking real good, is all I'm gonna say with the 2 all pro. I don't know if we'll double count that. We might have to bring in a rules expert, but until that until we look at our teams and our picks and stuff like that, you can find us on our socials, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your content. Little break, but we will be back for sure. So until then, keep pounding.